This conference will now be recorded.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us again for another installment of our BYF Ambassadors My Journey to Construction series. We're with Shane today, and I'm going to let him start us off by telling us who he is and what he does.
My name is Shane Cotter. I'm the president of ATEC Electrical Contractors. We are advanced technologies in electrical and communications. We have been in business for 15 years. I'm the original founder of ATEC, and that's what I do.
Awesome, Shane. Will you talk to us a little bit about why you got started in the construction industry?
Yeah, it's pretty easy. I was going to college full-time, working full-time. My wife was going to college full-time, and I just happened to do a English paper on, it was a compare and contrast paper versus apprenticeships versus going to a four-year university. And since, my wife would drop me off at work, she'd use our one vehicle, go to school, pick me up from work, and then I would go to school. So in this English class, it was about apprenticeship. So I researched all the apprenticeships from painters, electricians, carpenters, millwrights, whatever there was out there. I really put a lot of effort into this paper. And then after looking at it and studying the electrical apprenticeship, I was like, I think I might enjoy this a little bit more than what I'm doing now. So that's exactly how I got started in it. When I was at I work at a company called Corning Sidecor on the west side. I managed a lab for the most part, and I actually had an electrician cutting in a receptacle for my new printer. And we just got to talking, and after that, that was really the catalyst that really kind of pushed me forward. Because the question I asked, I said, hey, did you just get back from Florida or something? It looks like you got a tan. And he goes, no, I've been working outside on this job. And I was like, man, I wish I could be working outside right now. So that's how it jump started.
Awesome. What would you say is your favorite part about your job? You've been doing it for 15 years now. What do you love?
Okay, well, I've been an electrician for 23 years now. I started my company 15 years. So I love everything about it. I am passionate about it. That's why I've started my own company. What I really enjoy about it is it's something new. And I get to use my head. In school, I always did really well in science and math, but I absolutely hated English, social studies, and all those other classes that we had to take in high school. So, I love to be outside. I love to work with my hands. I love to be challenged. I love to be put under pressure. And, and that's more of the business side of it. But I've always, from day one, from my very first day on the job, I've always enjoyed this. I enjoyed the camaraderie of the construction workers. I enjoy the fraternity. I happen to be a union electrician, and I enjoyed the fraternity part of that. But I just love everything about it because I can either get into sales or I can use the hands the rest of my life. But the education I have received, puts me in the electrical industry.
When you think back, our audience is high school students who might just be, jumping into their first job. What was your very first job? Where'd you, spend your nights and weekends maybe during high school, or, what was your very first job?
Well, my very first job, I was a paper boy at 12 and 13 years old. I did that for several years. But my first real W-2 job, of course, it was at McDonald's. It was close to my house, and I had a bike. So I rode my bike to McDonald's every day because I didn't have enough money to buy a car, and I had to, of course, save up. But it was McDonald's.
I feel you. I was a fast food service worker as well. I was at Dairy Queen. When you were in high school, what was that like for you? Grade-wise, extracurriculars, what sort of stuff were you into? What was your high school career like?
So I went to two different high schools. I lived up north in a place called Chesterton, Indiana. And then I moved down to Indianapolis my sophomore year, and I finished out at Pike High School. I always went to school, and I'm not a dummy by any means, but when it came to the English, English typing, social studies, those classes, I wasn't a stellar student by any means, but I always enjoyed math and science, as I said earlier. But, I was an average student, maybe just a little bit above average, when I applied myself. And I apply myself when I enjoy something to the fullest. And, I just didn't enjoy all of it because I was like, why would I ever need to know this? But, it's, I was in choir, I was in band, played a little bit of sports. I played a little bit of soccer. But I kind of, I was just too small to do any kind of sports in high school. So I really didn't play much sports. But, once the kids started getting 5'10" and stuff, and I was staying at 5'2" my junior year, I just decided sports wasn't the way to do it.
Awesome. When you were in high school or when you just started your career as an electrician, what were some of the certifications or credentials that you got early on that were beneficial for you to have?
One of the first things I received through the apprenticeship was, it's called a Dixie, it's a Dixie certification. And it's pretty much a telecommunication certification. And that, my name of my company is ATEC, which stands for Advanced Technologies in Electrical and Communications. So that's what I like about the trade is, as an electrician, I'm also learning the low voltage side of it as well as the high voltage side of it. And being a Dixie technician has really propelled my career and my company because, when the Super Bowl came to Indiana, it was my company that was chosen to install the temporary infrastructure for the NFL, for the Super Bowl. And once it left Indiana, then they asked me to go to New Orleans. And then once I went to New Orleans, it was, then they wanted me to go to New York. And then they asked me to go to England. And then I went to Mexico. Then I started doing the draft and the Hall of Fame game. And so I've really been able to build a career with the NFL as far as I can really go. But now it's opened up. Now we're doing the NCAA. We've been asked to do the Grand Prix down in Miami because that's where the Super Bowl was last year. So, I've really taken a liking to the technology side of things, and that, and I'm a field technology rep for the NFL, and I travel to various stadiums to handle field technology, on the field for the team. So I enjoy it very much so. But my first one was my Dixie certification.
So as you think about that experience with the NFL, would you say that there is what were some of the pieces of your career that led you to that moment, right? That led you to that place where you were able to have that conversation and now you have this great partnership with these different athletic entities?
When I got out of high school, I went into the Army, and I served in the reserve components for 11 years. And the one thing I learned in the Army is have confidence in yourself and do what you do best, and that's the whole team aspect of the Army is if each person does what they do best, we can conquer all. And, I'll tell you the story when the game day on Super Bowl, I get there really early, the sun was coming up. And the guy that I worked for, and I still work for now that I was doing the job for, it was weird because, I was on the bench crying because I had been working over 100 hours a week for 5 weeks. And the most I worked was 127 hours in a week, but I averaged about 120 hours a week for 5 weeks because this was my company and I had to lead by example, right? So I'm sitting there and I have tears coming out of my eyes because the emotion was there because I realized I had accomplished something that I never would have dreamed that I could have. And 3 weeks ago when I'm working all those hours, I was like, this is the hardest thing I've ever had to do. It was just challenging all aspects of me. And so I look up and there he is, I'll never forget his silhouette. The sun was behind him, his silhouette's there. And I look up at him and he just walks away, didn't say a word to me. And later on that afternoon, he said, because this was his second Super Bowl, later on that afternoon, he told me last year he did that exact same thing. So, it's believe in yourself. If you believe in yourself, I'm a firm believer you can do anything that you put your mind to.
Yeah, so you mentioned believing in yourself, playing the role you're supposed to play, having confidence. Are there other skills that you think are really important for a young person as they're thinking about joining a specific trade or the construction industry in general?
You know, now that I have a company and I've managed several thousand people, the best thing they can do is show up to work on time with a positive attitude. Ask questions, be willing to learn. That's the biggest aspect of it. I still go to school today. I didn't enjoy school in high school, but now for some reason I love to learn. And of course it's about my industry. I'm not going to learn about crocheting, but I can't get enough of this. I can't get enough of the whole industry of running a business. It's so rewarding to me because, we can build a building, and when you flip on that light switch for the first time after you just took up 50 lights and then come on, or my guys are on the job and they say, hey, we're getting ready to fire this up. Do you want to be here? That still makes the hair stand up on the back of my neck, just because you realize this was a dirt mound before we got here. And now we just built I don't know, 1 million square foot warehouse with all LED lights and super efficient, electrical system, and the technology that we installed. It's pretty exciting. So my advice is, have a good work ethic, which is, just show up to work on time, be willing to learn, be willing to put your best foot forward, even when others aren't watching. To me, those are the keys to success with anything, but in this trade or in the trades, that's the biggest thing, is just be willing to work and be willing to do your best. That's all an employer asks for its employees.
Awesome. The audience today is high school students that are probably in a construction course already. So they probably are thinking about joining the industry. What would you say to them about joining the industry? Why should they consider it, or why have you found it to be a good industry for you?
Well, I actually have a son that's an apprentice now, and I have one that's getting out of the Army in June 13th. And I am one of those guys that this trade has been really good to me. So if you look at the statistics and get on the Department of Labor, the last thing I read is we're going to be short several thousand electricians in the future. And with that is, it's simple supply and demand. I did pay attention to economics in high school, and I understand supply and demand. If you like working with your hands, if you like being outside, and you're not outside all the time, I mean, there's so many aspects of trades, it's hard to pinpoint something, but if you do like electricity, or you do like hooking up computers or the technology of that, that's one thing. If you like building buildings, that's another trade. But, I would encourage any person to look into the trades for supply and demand, just because we don't have enough we call them kids, I shouldn't refer to them. We don't have enough high schoolers entering the trades. And part of that reason is because when I went to high school and I graduated in '90, it was pretty much you went to college, or I guess you were seen kind of like a failure. And it kind of got to me, it really did, because I can remember when all my friends were receiving acceptance letters to universities, and I was going into the Army, and I was like, well, what am I going to do when I get out of the Army? I am so thankful that I found the trades, just because I enjoy it so much. But I would research all of the trades, find out which one works best for you. There's many different aspects of the trade, like I mentioned before, from HVAC to temperature control. It's just a really good field to be in right now, just because there is a lot of work out there. They always need buildings. We run off electricity. They'll always need water. We always have to be moving forward when it comes to our infrastructure in the United States. So the jobs are going to be there. We just need people to do those jobs.
Awesome. Well, we're wrapping up our time together, and I'm so thankful for you sharing a little bit about your journey so far. Last question here is just, kind of, if you were speaking in front of a group of high school students, right? The audience that we're talking to today, what's the one thing you'd want them to know about going into your trade or about going into construction, other than what you just shared about maybe the why, but what's really on your mind right now when it comes to our industries and the things that we do?
Well, I know we need, being a business owner, I know we need more people. We need more qualified people to enter the trades. It is a rewarding career. The pay is outstanding. The benefits are outstanding. And the ability to go forward and do other things with that, it's limitless. I've always been an entrepreneur type of guy, from a paper route to whatever, but you can just do whatever you want to. You can set out, if you want to be a service truck driver in the industry, but we need good qualified people with a positive attitude, a good work ethic, that want to work 7 to 3:30, give it their all, go home to their families, coach their little league teams when they start getting older and having kids. I know these are younger generation, but it's I can't say enough about encouraging people that might at least give it a shot. Work as a summer helper, get into a trainee program, just see if you like it. I mean, it is not the typical education experience that I was expecting. It was so much more better than that. In Indiana, our apprenticeship programs, the one thing I did learn in that paper, whether you go union or non-union, are excellent, in any trade you want to get into. So I would definitely look into it, just so you know all your options. And the best part about life now is that you do have options to look into.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story with us, for sharing a little bit about your journey into construction. Everybody watching this, thanks so much for joining us for another interview, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time.